Welcome to the Wrestling Philosophy Show, where we discuss unique perspectives and beliefs on the sport of wrestling. Give us a follow or subscribe on various social media platforms, including YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Enjoy the show.
Show 54 with Coach Jamie Yezarski of the Wrestling Warehouse in New Bern, North Carolina. Coach Yezarski shares his Coach Marsh stories, coaching Raymond Jordan, and his up-and-coming podcast, Born Teachers. Thank you, Coach, for your time. Hope you guys enjoy this episode. Welcome, Coach Jamie Yezarski, Wrestling Warehouse, right? Joining you today, New Bern, North Carolina, correct?
That's it. Happy to be here.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time today. We were just talking off air. We crossed paths back in 2009 through Coach Von Druska at the camp at Lutheran West, and we kind of kept in touch. And when I launched this podcast, we were talking and just the ideas of who to have on and different angles with this show. So I'm glad we're able to finally connect. I had a little break this winter, but I was trying to get you on before then. But I'm finally glad we're able to connect. So welcome.
Yeah, man. Thank you. Thanks for having me on. And the only caveat I've got is you got to go back and get all those guys that I listed ahead of me. Got to get those guys on.
Yeah,
I want to hear their stories too.
Yeah, I got, like we mentioned off air, I got a long list of guys I want to get on here, and I appreciate it. I know I had a couple guys on that you mentioned, but you gave me a great list. So I'm looking forward to meeting those guys and hearing their stories. So sharing those stories. So
one of my favorite things about your podcast is, you have some big time guys on there, but you have a lot of just what feels like local coaches that maybe don't have the national prominence. Everybody doesn't know their name. And they've got so much to offer. Everybody's trying to do the best they can, helping kids, running programs and coaching wrestling. So it's good to see those types of coaches getting a little bit of spotlight.
Yeah, I think it's I like those conversations. I think I like the big names too, but they're all authentic and true conversations. So I guess kicking it off, can you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and how you got in the sport?
How I got in the sport. Well, I was telling you earlier about Coach Marsh.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was in middle school, there was this rumor of this legendary coach coming to town. This young guy, Coach Marsh, was super tough. He'd beat you up if you gave him any trouble. And he had a demo at the middle school, and I wasn't playing any sports. Like I told you, I was like 80 pounds. I had long hair. I was in all kinds of trouble, but I was kind of scrappy, and it caught my interest. And Coach Marsh caught my interest for whatever reason. So I went to this demo, and it was like such a hard workout, man. And he conditioned us at the end. And I remember leaving with my buddy. I got a ride home, and on the way home, I was like, man, that's the hardest thing I've ever done. Like, are your legs shaking? So a couple things struck me. Number one is like how hard it was, which I guess that's, people say wrestlers are a little bit different, but like that was a positive to me. It's like, man, that was the hardest thing I've ever done. And the second thing that struck me is my friend, I think his name was Mikey Higgins. He was like, no, not really. And it dawned on me, not everybody goes as hard as they can. That's like the first time it occurred to me, like, what do you mean? Like, you didn't push yourself? Like, I was freaking shaking in there, and you were laying down. Like, come on. Anyway, that stuck with me, but I didn't wrestle in middle school. I didn't go out for wrestling as a freshman. My sophomore year in high school, I was sitting in drafting class with a good friend, Matt Hopkins, who I think just made like lieutenant colonel in the Army.
Oh, wow.
A month or so ago. We were in drafting class. He said, man, I'm gonna go out for wrestling this afternoon. You want to join me? I said, hell yeah, I'll go. And that was the fall of '89. I think I was in the 10th grade, and went to wrestling practice that afternoon and was just immediately hooked, and just loved it. And again, I loved it because it was hard, not just a physical hard, but like learning the technique was hard. The technique's really what hooked me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's little tricks, little Jedi tricks I can do to make
Action,
things
reaction.
easier. Action, reaction. anyway, I was hooked. 10th grade, never wrestled before. Matt didn't stick it out. He's a tough guy, but for whatever reason, it just wasn't for him. And so then I was still there. I might have wrestled 4 matches that year, maybe 5. If I won 2 of them, I'm probably exaggerating. But what I do remember is how much I loved it. And I remember we had a little Christmas break. And back then there was 13 weight classes in North Carolina. And there was probably 18, maybe 20 of us in the room. And when we came back from that 3 days off or whatever we had, there were no more JVs in the room. Like it was 14 people. It was the 13 starters and me. And that's how we finished out the season. It worked out perfectly because everybody had a partner. I got to drill with a starter, and I was in those groups of 4. And I just remember my goal just being to get a takedown, like I'm going to get a takedown on Corey Oliver, our 135 pounder, before this year's over. I'm going to get a takedown on Coach Marsh's son, who's wrestling 130. I'm going to get a takedown on these guys. And I don't know if I ever did. I can remember touching a couple legs and getting in on some, but if I finished any, it was probably 1 takedown.
Nice.
So I stuck that year out, and I didn't get a letter. I remember being pissed. I felt like I earned a letter just for sticking it out. But Coach Marsh had a rule. I think you had to win 7 matches or something. I don't remember. And that summer we went to Granby School in June. Took a big group up there. I think still be considered a big group. I mean, we probably had 20 kids. We took an activity bus, went to Granby School up in Hampton-Sydney College in Virginia. And we had on that trip, what I remember is several middle schoolers, whether they were younger kids who ended up fast forward becoming one of the better teams, I think, ever to wrestle at New Bern High School. But we had a good group of young kids. We went up to that camp, and back then I think camp was a week, like 5 days of camp, 3 sessions a day, 2 hours a session. Every session was like a full wrestling practice. They would drill you to death, which I loved up there, but they would drill you. So in the mornings, first of all, and back then it was 300 or 400 people in this camp.
Oh, wow.
And they were big camps.
And that's the Granby camp?
Yeah, the Granby School of Wrestling.
Yes.
And so this is summer of 90, probably. It was my first time going there. And I've been every year since, maybe the exception of 5 years. Most of those in recent years that I missed, but I never stopped going. So they would divide everybody up by states, and they would say, okay, these 6 states, you guys are going to start at bottom work in the morning. And these other states, you guys are going to start over here with top. The rest of you are going to be takedown. At Hampton-Sydney, they had back then what was a newer gymnasium down at the bottom of the hill. And they had big fans, and they opened it up. There was never any air conditioning there. And this is, June in the South. It was always hot. And then they had an old gym. We called it at the top of the hill. That's where bottom work was. And it was always, a lot of times, Billy Martin Sr., old man Martin, would be up there coaching you. But what I remember is wherever they told us to go, we ignored it. And we would start every morning takedowns at 8 o'clock in the morning with Stevie Martin, who at the time was wrestling for Dan Gable at Iowa. And we would do that because we wanted to get it out of the way. We didn't want to have to deal with Stevie Martin at the end of the day because he was hard. He was hard on you as a kid.
Back out of the way first, right?
Yeah. So we'd ignore whatever they told us. We'd hit takedowns with Stevie in the morning. And then we'd rotate up to the hill at lunch and do bottom work. And then we'd finish the day with top work, which was always a little bit easier.
Okay.
It seemed easier to us anyway.
So was Coach Marsh, did he run their system, the wrestling system then, or is it kind of where he came from, or?
Yeah, I think he was working for a moving company around Chesapeake, Virginia in the early 80s. And he got his 2 kids in the wrestling program up there. And it must've been with the Martin family. so when he came to, fast forward, he came to New Bern in 1988. He had a somewhat success at a couple other high schools he'd been at. And I don't know exactly the conversation he might have had with Wayne Martin, but he decided he was going all in on that Granby system of wrestling. He had never wrestled that system, but he was going to the camps and he had those guys as contacts and he was going all in on it. I wasn't there that first year at the high school that he came in, but he can tell you the story. He came in, they had, 5 coaches in 5 years at New Bern before he got here. Never had a lot of success.
And he was there for what, 20 plus years then, right?
That's right. He came there in 88 and was certainly there through 2002, 2004. Yeah, he coached Raymond all the way through. So 2004 or 5. But I understand the story and it's corroborated. He walked into wrestling that first day and he told this group of kids who didn't know him, at all. Mm-hmm. He said, if I'm committed to this, and if you guys commit to me, I can promise you 2 things are going to happen. Number one, we're going to win the conference this year. And they must have looked at him like, what are you talking about? We didn't even win a match, maybe last year. And number 2, for our first home duel, you're going to walk out on the mat on your hands. And you can imagine everybody looking around like, what'd you say? We're going to walk out on our hands and we're going to win the conference. And they did both of those things. But I think it's interesting because it could have gone the other way. Those kids could have been like, who's this joker?
Yeah.
But they did. And he had that aura about him. He told you you're going to be a conference champ. He told you the whole team's going to walk out on their hands for their warm up. And those guys bought in and they won the conference that year. And almost every year, certainly more than 10 out of 20 years, they were conference champs. That's
awesome. So that he was consistent, obviously, right? Putting out conference champs and staying there that long. What is there anything you took away from his coaching style or anything you sticks with you?
And everything. I mean, he's influenced me more than maybe anybody. I want to say outside of my family, but the truth is, as a teenager, I don't know how much influence you get from your dad. I don't know how much you look to your family for influence. So outside of wrestling, inside of wrestling, I mean, I wrestled for him for 3 years and I was always his assistant when he was there. If I was at college, if I was come home on the weekends, and we were just always close. We're still close. Me and Raymond are going down to see him in July and do a camp for him down in Murrells Inlet. But early on, the real things that stuck with me, he was big on positive attitude and visualization. And I'm talking back in 90, 91, that was his attention to detail, of course, repetition. And I still believe in all those things, but more powerful than any of it was probably attitude first, and if you don't believe in yourself, you're already defeated. Even back then, it almost feels like people don't talk about visualizing as much now as we did back then. He brought in this VHS cassette. I remember at the end of practices, more along the lines of my junior year now, once a week or so at the end of practice, he would turn out the lights and he'd put in this VHS tape. It's called Incredible Self-Confidence, Self-Hypnosis tape. And the guy would walk you through, you feel your ears relaxing and your shoulders, and he'd walk through every piece of your body and get you relaxed, and had all these subliminal messages in it. But it was cool. It made you think. It made you realize how powerful the mind was. And I'll be honest with you, the cue, the subconscious cue from that video was incredible self-confidence, right? That was what your little mantra. If you're nervous, you're going into a match, you'd say incredible self-confidence. I don't know if it does anything or not, but I still say it to this day. I say it when I have a big sales presentation. I said it before this podcast. If I've got anything going on, it's still in my brain from 1990. I say incredible self-confidence. I've tried to find that thing on Amazon.
Can't find it.
It's not available.
Maybe someone listening knows where they have a copy or something, old VHS in the
I
basement.
wonder if I would think like, man, how cool. If I saw it now, I'd think this is great. I
Yeah.
want to share this. Or if I would be like,
Uh,
holy cow, I must have been nut.
Hey, it works though. I recently had Coit Cooper on. He talked about the same thing. He had a coach in high school, and they would visualize. I know a lot of the power of visualization and repetition and the mantra. So regardless if how you look at it now, it's stuck with you, right? And kind of made an impact on your
Absolutely.
life. So
And I can't imagine anywhere else. I'm an optimistic person by nature, maybe too optimistic. And I just can't imagine where else that came from if it didn't come from Coach Marsh. So, man, I thank him for that.
that's pretty cool. Awesome story. You mentioned Raymond, right? Raymond Jordan. We talked off air a little bit, and you mentioned I have to have him on, and he's got incredible stories. But I guess tell us a little bit about your relationship with him, and what he means to you.
Man, I'm as close with Raymond as I've ever been with a male. I mean, he's like a brother. He just turned 35 yesterday, I think. I'm 47. So when I was already out of college, I was an assistant coach at New Bern. When we discovered him in the middle school and got him involved, he came over as a freshman. As an 8th grader, he would come over and just wreck all of our middleweight kids, seniors, state qualifiers. Natural athlete, maybe the most gifted guy I've ever been around physically. Also super smart, but maybe, more importantly, see all those great athletes walk in the halls. He was humble and focused and was going to do exactly what you told him. I still use him as a reference because any camp or if Coach Marsh was talking, you'd see Raymond at the very front. And whether he was a freshman or when he was a senior, he was a 3-time state champ. He was 3rd as a freshman. He was a high school All-American. He was always listening. Sorry about that.
You're right.
Decline this call. He was always laser focused. You could see it in his eyes. When somebody was talking, he was listening to what they were saying. He was taking it to heart. And so I'll say now, anytime I'm doing a clinic or a camp and I notice a kid that's really dialed in, I'll say that kid's got, he's got that Raymond look. He's really focused and paying attention. He was a joy to coach. He was the most successful guy probably we've ever had come out of New Bern's program. And he could go into more detail, but I can tell you, he lost both his parents when he was very young. He lived with his grandmother in a far from ideal situation, from house to house. One house he was in was condemned, lived in a trailer with a lot of family members and just a lot of crazy stuff going on in his life. And somehow he stayed focused, through all that. And went on to get a full scholarship to Missouri, University of Missouri.
2-time All-American, you said?
2-time All-American, 2 different weight classes. After that, he was as high as I think 3rd on the Olympic ladder. Won a lot of big overseas tournaments. I think he won a big tournament in Iran. He had more success overseas than he would have at home. He would come back home. Trying to think, was it who's the head coach at Pitt now?
I'm drawing a blank right now.
Yeah, I don't know if he didn't get past him. I think maybe in the Olympic trial.
He just wrestled in the cards this winter too. I'm horrible with name.
It's all good. And then Jake Herbert, was top of that weight class. And I think he beat Herbert lots of times, but maybe never when it counted.
Keith Gavin.
Keith Gavin, yeah. I think he lost to Gavin in the Olympic trials. He ended up being Burroughs' training partner heading into, was it 2012 when they went to London? So he trained with Burroughs for years, Just a phenomenal guy, great wrestler. And I say to kids now all the time, that are maybe getting a little full of themselves, everybody in North Carolina, everybody in wrestling around here, they know and they remember Raymond, and what they remember is what a great person he was.
Mm-hmm.
And of course he was a great wrestler, but everybody will immediately comment on what a great person he was. And I try to stress that to these kids. I mean, you can be a great wrestler, but if you're an asshole, everybody's going to remember that you're an asshole.
Right. They're going to steer away, stay away, steer away, whatever it is. And nobody cares how good of a wrestler you are if you're not a good person. That's a fact.
Yeah.
100%.
So when Raymond was in high school, for the most part, I was his drill partner, because I was in my 20s.
Mm-hmm.
He was wrecking everybody in the room.
Right.
Guys really couldn't get anybody to drill with him more than one day. Nobody would come back the second day to drill with him. He just had this ungodly grip strength. I know we would have no hair on our wrist. If you drilled with Raymond more than 2 days in a row, you never had any hair on your wrist because his grip was just stripping. It's like a kid Indian burning you constantly. Coach Marsh got him a job one summer pulling crab pots. I don't know what came first. If his grip helped him pull crab pots, or if the crab pots gave him that steel vice grip.
A little bit of both, right?
Yeah.
That's awesome. So now you're not, coaching and running the wrestling warehouse, right? You're at New Bern for a while. You helped at ECU for a while, but now I guess tell us a little bit about wrestling warehouse.
So I was Coach Marsh's assistant, through the 90s. My little brother wrestled for him. I was back and forth. I went to college, but never too far away. I went to Campbell as a freshman, and then I transferred to Pembroke.
Okay.
Then I ended up at ECU. ECU didn't have any wrestling or club wrestling or anything at that time. Excuse me. So let's see, somewhere around 2009, we were taking the New Bern team to, we would always go to team camp in Chapel Hill, competition camp.
Okay.
So even back to that first time, 1990, when we would go to technique camp at Granby, we'd take the upperclassmen and go to competition camp in Chapel Hill. Met a guy up there at camp. That's when I met Jeremiah Tobias. We were up there at Carolina camp, and there was this guy from Michigan. I think AJ Grant was the assistant at Carolina.
Was Jeremiah just down at your place, or was it recently, or?
Yeah, we had some time down in Wilmington. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Time in Wilmington, little vacation. Anyway, he was teaching top work, and I was like, man, he's really good at teaching with the kids. A lot of these 4-time state champs, hard to teach what they do. They just do it. So you kind of got to pick where you went every time. So we ended up going back to his session over and over again. I was like, we leave here, we're going to have this top work down. This kid holds a pin record for Michigan. We're going to figure this out. He ended up taking a job in Wilmington, and starting a new club called Port City Wrestling Club. Boomer Boyd, his dad, helped start that club. Boomer went on to wrestle at Missouri and finish up at Duke. Okay. He's back in Wilmington now, Innovate Wrestling Club, him and Alan Waters. But anyway, Jeremiah was down there at Port City. So that's about 90 minutes from New Bern. So every Sunday, any kids I could get in my car, I would go down there and we'd wrestle with Jeremiah. And if I couldn't get any kids in my car, I would go. I didn't have any kids at the time. And man, I just, like when I was traveling up and met you the first time in Ohio, I was just 24/7 wrestling. I just loved it. Like that was, if you said, hey, vacation at the beach, or we got a wrestling camp, I'm going to wrestling camp. I mean, it was just that much fun to me. So I was down there every week wrestling with Jeremiah and learning so much from him. Couple years, he ended up moving back to Michigan. And I was able to kind of slip in and take over that club where he was. So I moved to Wilmington that year, was working at Port City Wrestling Club. And then I'm trying to remember what happened first. Somewhere in there, I was going to be a father. So my daughter was on the way.
Okay.
So I moved back to New Bern, and one of the kids that would spend a lot of time down there was Alex Bray. He went to Croatan High School, a real powerhouse 1A or 2A school from North Carolina at the beach. His dad had bought this old warehouse where they used to make cabinets down in Newport. It's about 30, 40 minutes from where we lived in New Bern. He had bought this place so the team would have a good practice facility, and hoping to bring guys in and do clinics and, trying to help his kid and the program be the best they could be. So he really started the Wrestling Warehouse. He started that name. And but as soon as I moved back, I was going down there and we started holding practices every Sunday. And that was 2010 or 11. And it's been going ever since. His son ended up going up to Alma College, one of the first probably recruits for Jeremiah. Didn't stay up there too long. I think he came back after that first year, but he ended up selling that building. I found a new location in New Bern, and then, here we are. It's funny. I'll have some kids now, I'm always like, hey, you need to come get extra work with us. And then you see those guys that don't come, right? You'll see them at the gym when you're lifting. It's kind of a running joke for anybody that knows me, because literally since it was in Newport in 2010, we've practiced every Sunday at 2. I don't think I've missed a Sunday unless it was maybe Christmas, even Easter. I go on Easter, even if it's just for 45 minutes, I go in there and get a sweat going. And I'll have a kid come up to me and say, Coach, I've been meaning to come to your practice. When is it?
Yeah.
I'll say, buddy, 10 years, every Sunday, 2:00. Same thing you said when you asked me last year, Sundays at 2.
Yeah.
So it's been good, man. It's been a great experience. It's like a laboratory when you're able to get in there and play and experiment and supplement what the high schools have going on, hopefully able to get a little more individual, help those kids. As coaches got their hands full with 20, 30 kids in a room, it's hard to slow down and spend time with one guy. So we've been able to do that at the warehouse.
Awesome. You have some guys helping you? Who are some of the guys helping you, or is it just mainly you running it?
Yeah, man, it's been mainly me. I've always had guys sticking around and helping. Right now, Connor Rott helps. He was, that's an interesting story too. He was runner-up in North Carolina 2 years ago, I think. He would have graduated. Super tight match, lost the last second takedown. It was maybe 2-1. He got in a scramble and got taken down there in the last second. A lot of people wanted to protest the match, and I was like, man, it was close. It was a good takedown. We're not going to end our career on a protest. But he was driving down when he was about 9, 10 years old to Newport. His dad was bringing him down. So he's the only kid I've been fortunate enough to coach through youth and all the way through high school. Cool. So we got a pretty strong relationship too. He helps me out a bunch now. He'll be going back up to NC State here in a couple months, and I'm pretty bummed.
Yeah.
I'm losing my primary helper.
Right. That's how it usually works, right?
Yeah.
And then then you run the Mat Ninjas, kind of like your intro level, right?
Yeah. So it's all the same place. It's all little kids. We're experimenting with it. I'm not personally super big on a lot of competition with the little kids, and there's a lot of right ways to do things right. So I'm not knocking what anybody does. Mm-hmm. But my kid's 6, and what I want, my goal for him is for him to love wrestling. Right. My goal is not for him to be a state champ at age 8 or a national champ at age 10. That'd be cool. But more importantly, I want him to love wrestling and wrestle in high school, and if that's what he decides to do. So that's my goal with the whole Mat Ninjas, is to have fun. When somebody says wrestling practice,
body awareness, right?
Eyes light up. Yeah, we do a lot of gymnastics warm-ups, front rolls and cartwheels and bear crawls, and we play a lot of games. And if you got any games, send them to me, because we didn't play any games when I was wrestling.
If you have some, send them over. Text them over.
It's interesting though. I'm always looking around for youth wrestling videos. There's not a lot. I mean, I feel like there's a there's maybe a gap there, where somebody put out a lot of good material on working with those young kids. We play a lot of toe tag, we play a lot of sumo, cowboy drill, where you kind of hook under and try to stay on top, and the bottom man goes crazy. But that's it. Bottom line, I want them to have fun. I feel like if they grow up to love wrestling, I can guarantee they're going to be pretty good.
Right. Right.
When I was in high school, we had a bigger youth program here when Coach Marsh was still here. We'd have 40, 50 kids in our program, and he would divide them up and kind of assign each one of the guys. 3 or 4 of us on the high school team would kind of coach a little kids team, and we'd have duels before our home duels. One little kids team that was coached by one of my teammates would wrestle my team. We'd have 5 or 6 matches before our home duel, and they were great, man. And back then we practiced them the same way we did at high school. Like, we ran those kids through a practice, and they were technically good. But what I remember the most is if we had 50 kids on those youth programs, we had 2 kids maybe that wrestled in high school.
Right.
And that's what stuck with me. Somewhere there's a disconnect. If we've got 50 kids on our youth program and we only get 2 of those kids to wrestle in high school, I don't know what the ratio should be, but it shouldn't be that bad.
Right. Yeah. Right. Unfortunately, that's most youth clubs to high schools, right? It gets tough for whatever reason, other sports, whatever it may be. But yeah, definitely. If you're not having fun at 6 years old, you're definitely not going to make it to 10, right? If you're not having fun at 8, you're definitely not going to make it to 12.
That's it. I mean, we're never going to retain 50 out of 50 guys. And there's sports, there's video games, there's life, there's so much more going on. And probably everything, all my little takeaways, I'm sure I heard somebody else say them first, but I just feel like the goal of a youth program is to teach these kids to love wrestling.
Right.
And then as a middle school coach, everybody wants to win the conference, and I get it. You got to be successful. But I think as a middle school coach, if you can put 10 kids into the high school every year that like wrestling and have some mat experience, that'd be a tremendously successful program.
Right. So many people are worried about winning or losing at 8th grade, and then kid doesn't go out freshman year because it's all about the wins and losses. Well, that kid could have flourished and blossomed,
That's right.
4 years down the road, right?
That's right.
So, and I guess, the other side of that too is, if it was easy, everyone would be doing it, and the retention rate would be high, and it wouldn't be special, right? Right. We know it's hard work, as we mentioned. So, I mean, it's that balancing act, right? It's going to be
absolutely,
tough, but it's not made for everyone. If it was made for everyone, it wouldn't be wrestling, right?
No, there's definitely something special about it. Like we were talking probably before recording, how hard that first practice was for me, and how that was really hooked me. Like, I'd never done anything that hard. But I also remember back in the day, like, we used to try to run people off, like that was our goal. If we had 30 people out on the first day of practice, we're going to run 10 of these guys off. They're not tough enough, and I don't think that's the right approach either. Let's help them find a way. There's a place for them in that wrestling room. If they're willing to stick it out.
It could be a tough kid, but just be having a bad day that day. Screw this, I'm not coming back, and it's just give a bad place, bad time. But
yeah, and I mean, anybody walks in, if you've never wrestled and you walked in day one and it was an Iowa style practice, you might not come back. I mean, there's a couple crazy guys that are going to like that, but most 15-year-old kids, got to hook them, and then you can push them a little more.
Right. So talking about hard work, right? We talked off air a little bit, your idea and vision of possibly a podcast, right? What?
Yeah, I've been toying with it for a long time. Came up with a cool name, so I got to start right. Born Teachers Podcast, and kind of the same thing. We talked about it before.
We've been talking about it a while, right? For 6-8 months about it, right?
Yeah. Want an opportunity to talk to other coaches and make those connections and pick their brain, and see how are they designing a practice, and what are you having success with right now, and what are your values, all that stuff, be able to share all that. And Born Teachers is a quote from Gates of Fire by Stephen Pressfield. As all born teachers, he was primarily a student.
Mhm.
And, I think number one, the best coaches are really teachers in all sports. And, I think the best teachers are always students. So that kind of
I like it.
tied it up nicely.
Yeah.
So I got a cool name. Now I need a cool logo. Then I actually have to do the work.
Yeah. No, it's right. It's part of the process of learning yourself, right? And just passing, stories on to these new coaches that have experienced coaching and what to do, what not to do. And the beauty of it, you and I could have the same guests, but we're gonna have different stories that come out of that podcast, right? So
Absolutely.
so I'm anxious to hear it, see you getting it started. So anything I can do to help you get it going.
Appreciate it, man.
I'm looking forward to it. I think we have a lot of similarities and reasons why we want to do coaching and why we're in coaching and why we want to do a podcast, right? So
Yeah. Speaking of that, so imagine you guys probably had a condensed season, right?
uh
You have to have a full season. What's going on? Are you still
yeah, we
wrestling?
had it was different, right? It was some tournaments, no big tournaments. It was all duels and smaller tournaments, no fans at some, limited fans at others. The state process was limited fans, so we had it, and it was we do light weights in the morning and then heavy weights in the afternoon. So it was like a condensed, some of these, the state tournament trail was condensed, so you're wrestling, back to back. But we had it, and I guess it turned out better than I thought it was gonna be. I was really concerned with a kid wrestling someone at our sectionals, and then that kid was exposed, then they'd have to sit out the rest of the season. But I heard of a few cases where the teams weren't able to compete in the postseason. So it wasn't bad. It turned, went better than I thought. We actually have our mask mandate coming up here, so everything's going to be capacity as far as the venues. The spectators can go in June. So
Yeah.
Would you guys have a condensed 6-week? Is that what it was?
We're like still in the middle of our season. It's crazy.
Wow.
So bizarre, right? So the state tournament is going to be I think the last weekend in June. What's interesting is next week's the last day of school.
Right. So how many kids are going to stick around?
Actually, it may even been today, so they're going to be out of school with 5 weeks of wrestling season left. So
it has to hurt participation, right?
What's that?
That has to hurt participation. You got kids wanting to get into summer and go.
Yeah, I can't really
beginner type kid.
Imagine what it's going to look like. We definitely had very low numbers historically.
Mhm.
In our conference here, there was a couple teams that didn't field a team. One of them, Greenville Rose, was a very competitive team. So you hate to see that. And then, what's it going to look like now? It's summertime, right? If you're a senior and you don't live and breathe wrestling, you may just be ready to move on. You got college coming up. How are those kids going to get there? Ones, if they rode the bus, how are they even going to get to the
other
school?
sports? I mean, is baseball going on right now, or what are there spring sports going on, or?
And I don't know about other sports.
But right, that's another.
What are these other sports you speak of? But it's going to be interesting, man. And I don't envy anybody in the school system right now, for sure. They got a full plate. And, we talk a little bit about philosophy and how it kind of evolves. And then when you've been in the sport so long, it's almost philosophy start to meld together. It's not as simple as it used to be, I think, to verbalize a philosophy. But, probably the thing a kid brought this to my attention. But what I say now more than anything to these guys is, hey, you got to make the best of it.
Right.
So whatever their response is, we got to wear masks, or we don't get to practice this week, or we only have one duel. Hey, you got to make the best of it. We're here. Let's make the best of it.
That's what I told my wrestlers this year. We had, some guys sitting out for, weeks at a time because they were exposed, and, we didn't have a state tournament last year. And that's what I kept. One kid was in quarantine 3 different times. I was like, I don't know what to tell you, but these are the cards you're dealt right now. I don't have the answer, but that's the best I can tell you.
Yeah.
Here's the cards. You got to be working out on your own, doing what you can, because these are the cards you're dealt. It's who knows why it's happened to you, but
So let me ask you, man, because some of the questions, I love questions.
Mm-hmm.
I've kind of got this collection going of
Right.
potential questions that I want to ask podcast guests. And some of them are so abstract. I feel like people are going to look at me like, well, what does that mean? Right. So, but now with what we're going through, it's actually a little more applicable, right? Because one of my questions was like, if you could only practice 2 hours a week, what would that look like? Instead of 2 hours a day, you can only practice 2 hours a week. Or even what if your whole season was 4 weeks? How would you prepare for that state tournament? Because here and maybe you guys too, we get a lot of guys that start wrestling in high school,
Mm-hmm.
Or at least half your room is going to be not very experienced.
Right.
So how did you handle that? What's the experience level of your room, and how does your practices look different, maybe technically or structurally now than it did during a regular season?
Yeah. So, from coaching high school, it's going to be actually a lot different. Even going from this year, we had a bigger senior class for us, small school, and going back to a even smaller room next year with less experienced guys. And that's kind of what I was, I guess, preaching to them this year. I was like, when those guys were on quarantine, the seniors, I was like, look at you guys, this group of freshmen we have, you guys are going to be the leaders next year. Let's start leading now, acting like leaders in the room. Because let's fast forward, these leaders are going to be gone that you're looking up to. Right. And I remember that myself, same situation at a class when I wrestled, gone. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm the leader in the room. Right. But yeah, that's a great question. 2 hours a week, that's a real good, off the top of my head, I would say on position, right? Stance, position, top, bottom position. And then at least you're getting the core of what your work is going to be done, the basics. Let them do conditioning on their own, I would say, right? That focus on the basics and the position, I guess. That's a really good question on the spot. 2 hours a week. Okay. But yeah, it was crazy this year, going back. We had kids out of the room, that would kind of dictate the pace of the room, and like, how do you manufacture that intensity in the room when you have the top level guys out of the room? But so it's going to change for us. It changed for us this year. And it's going to change for us next year. Even having a smaller team and, getting the best out of them, because, having a small team, they'd see the same repetition day after day, wrestling with the same guys. So, trying to put them in different situations in live situations instead of just wrestle a match. You're in a single leg, you're in this position. That's what we did a lot this year. Just with limited.
What are your most common positions, like for live situational goes, short goes in on a single, or
short offense, head trap stuff is what, we work the crap out of. Some of our guys struggled with, being underneath or on top of a guy, trying to, chase that ankle or, getting out, instead of just, they wanted to hang on for, a stalemate. It's like, no, wrestle through the position, and they kind of knew the pecking order in the room. So it's kind of hard to manufacture, okay, let's wrestle through the position. But, so that's what we worked on a lot. That and, on the mat wrestling too, situations, getting to the feet, what are you going to do? Mat return. So that's a good question though. 2 hours a week. Wow. Practice.
Well, I think, I think short offense, front headlock is what I call it a lot.
Yeah.
And then mat returns. I mean, those are two big ones, I think, if you don't have a lot of time, and you get your basic stance.
Yeah, because a lot of our guys had different turns, that's what we'd work with too. Okay, we've had limited time. It's hit your go-to takedown, and then you go to turn. Every guy has a little bit different style too. So
right.
But so yeah. Yeah. So what are some questions? Yeah, not for me, but I guess what with your podcast, what who's your list of who you're gonna get on? Top 3, who are you gonna have on?
Well, I'm gonna start with the people that I know and love, because they'd be kind to me. So, Raymond is probably the top of the list.
Okay.
And man, he's got stories. He's just had such an amazing career, going through Missouri and um, living with Brian Stan and traveling with Jordan Burroughs. And you remember Jason Miller, Mayhem Miller?
Sounds familiar.
He had a bully beatdown show, I think, on MTV or something.
Okay.
Anyway, he was recruiting Raymond real hard one time to be in the mixed martial arts. I can remember Raymond was at our house. Seemed like it was over a Christmas holiday or something, just after he graduated from Missouri, maybe. And he got a phone call that was Mayhem Miller calling him from Japan. You know, he went over there on a trip with him one time and sat in the corner for one of their, I don't remember what that promotion was called over there now.
Okay.
But you know, he offered him a contract. And just so many cool stories he's got from being around all those people. So I definitely start with him, probably Coach Tobias. You know, we talk all the time anyway. Interestingly enough, my high school senior year AP English teacher, Mrs. Zimick, she also had a pretty powerful impact on my life, you know, and wasn't a coach, obviously, but was an amazing teacher. You know, I wouldn't have graduated high school if it wasn't for her. That's no understatement. You know, I guess she can't get in trouble because she's not in the school system anymore, but I wasn't always the best student. And if I wasn't in I had her second period English class. And if I wasn't in her second period class, she would send somebody to my house to get me.
Oh, wow.
So she'd send a student, Chuck, go to Jamie's house and drag him out here right now, you know, and there I'd come being drugged back into school. She was a great teacher. I remember at the end of my senior year, sitting down in her class, and she said, are you taking the AP English exam today? And I was like, no, Ms. Zimick, I didn't have the money to pay for that. And I don't even know if I'm going to go to college, you know? And she said, well, it's paid for and it's upstairs and it starts in 10 minutes. And she sent me upstairs, and I placed out all my freshman because of that, you know?
Nice.
That's a whole nother story on her, man. She actually, the reason I went to Campbell as a freshman. So let me back up a little bit, right? When I was a freshman in high school, I wasn't playing any sports. Like a lot of kids, you know, I was angry at some things. My parents divorced when I was in middle school. I was getting in trouble, you know. And maybe one of the things that hurt me the most was I was pretty smart. So I would literally do the least that I could do to get by. And sometimes I can remember like making a 45 in some of my classes midpoint of the year. And then I'd say, what do I got to make to pass? And they said, well, you'd have to have a 99 to pass. So I'd make a 99. Jeez. The second half of the year, I'd pass with a 71 or 72, you know. So go to 10th grade, I start wrestling. I'm keeping my grades up better because I want to be eligible for wrestling. But I still wasn't making great grades. I never wrestled before the 10th grade. I wasn't thinking that I was going to go on to college and wrestle. I don't know how all this will tie together, but going back to 90, after that sophomore season, first year wrestling, we went to camp. We left camp. I think we came home for a night or two, and then we got on that same bus and we drove to Chapel Hill for the state games, which was kind of like the Junior Olympics in North Carolina. And I won the state games, which wasn't a big deal, right? I don't know. It was probably could have only been 8 people in my bracket. It was a summer tournament, but it was in Carmichael Gymnasium on Chapel Hill campus. And it was a big deal to me, you know, that I went from not being a starter and now I'm the only kid on the team that just won this tournament. And the next year I was the captain of the team as a junior. So as a junior, I'm having more success, you know, and go into my senior year, and I'm expected to win it. You know, I don't know what rankings were. We didn't have the internet, but I would have been up there, you know. I expected to win it.
Right.
And started getting some letters from some schools, you know, and so I started making pretty good grades. as a senior, because I cared, but it was a little too late to pull that core GPA up. So it was kind of late in the game when I started realizing there was possibilities opening up, to do something other than hang out around my hometown. And I share that to say this same teacher, Ms. Zimick, she had somebody in class. So I got a letter from Bill Lamb at Chapel Hill, right? And I was fired up. I get a chance to go to wrestle Carolina. Are you kidding me? And they were pretty decent back then. The ACC wasn't strong like it is now, but Carolina was winning the ACC. In '94, they were going to host a national tournament. And man, that would have just been to me, like, that's no different than wrestling at Iowa. I mean, I just was so far beyond anything I could dream about. My core GPA ended up being 0.2 of a point too low to get in. I lost by 1 point in the semifinals, so I didn't win the state tournament. So they certainly weren't going to make an exception for me at that point. And I had no other plans, right? I just figured, well, I'm not going to go to college. Well, that Mrs. Emick had another student in class fill out an application for me to Campbell. This student was going to Campbell. So they filled out one for me and mailed it in. So I got an acceptance letter. Again, all from this teacher, Mrs. Emick.
Wow.
Taught AP English at New Bern High School in '92. I had never visited the campus. I got that acceptance letter, 2 weeks before school started, and I was gone.
That's awesome.
But I would have never gone to that school. I never even would have filled out an application if it wasn't for that teacher. So yeah, I want to get her on the podcast.
You better.
Yeah.
You need to get her on right away, man. Get her right away. Get her on first. So it's gonna.
I actually called her a week or so ago and told her what I was doing, and I wanted to have her on.
Record it. It doesn't turn out how you want to do it. Do it again, right? That's the beauty.
Yeah.
So it's gonna be called Born Teachers, right?
Yep. Born Teachers podcast. Maybe Wrestling with Life.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
So looking forward to it.
Wrestling focused, obviously. I love talking about practices and how you structure them, but of course we want to tie this stuff into real life,
Right. So, well, thanks, Coach. You have anything else? Anything else you want to talk about before we sign off here?
No, man. Really want you to connect with Coach Marsh. Okay. I wanted to talk a little bit about him, and just share a little bit because he came to New Bern in '86 through 05, was 323-50.
Wow.
14 conference championships, 4-time they were state runner up. He never won it. But I got one great story for you on him, and we can cut it. And this stuck with me, and I didn't even realize how much it stuck with me, or, it was years before I realized that everybody's not like that. Mm-hmm. Right. So that team that was middle schoolers, when I went to that first Granby school, they, most of them came up and wrestled at the high school. I'm trying to look at the date. So 1995, most of those guys are now seniors, and it's one of the best teams we've ever had at New Bern High School. And back then, Riverside High School was dominating North Carolina wrestling. I'd have to Google it and see, but they probably won 8 out of 10. Wow. Cary High School is the most dominant here. Jerry Winterton, you should talk to him sometime too. But Riverside was dominating then. And this is what for better or for worse, right? This is what a stickler Coach Marsh was. What I would consider like really principle-based decisions. And then living with the consequences of those decisions. He was very black and white for him. A lot of lessons we learned, right, about like being on time. I say with my guys at ECU club, like, if you wrestle up here with me for 3 or 4 years, and when we're done, you haven't learned to be on time, then I've failed. Like, I don't care if you won a national title. If you haven't learned to show up on time or to be 5 minutes early, I haven't done my job. That came from Coach Marsh. The bus was leaving at 7 a.m. He was leaving. I can remember parents chasing the bus to catch up and try to get their kid on the bus. Like, he would leave anybody. When it was time to go, it was time to go. So we've got this great dual team, and they make it to the semifinals of the dual team. Now, Coach Marsh has never won a state championship in North Carolina. This is the best team. Probably he was runner-up more than once, but this team was ready to win it.
Wow.
The 103-pounder at that time, I'll call him out. His name was Yezarski, and he was good, solid team. So he had been in a bunch of trouble, and Coach Marsh has had like a come to Jesus meeting with him. Said, "Look, Willow," we called him Willow from the movie. One more time, anything happens, you're gone. Like, I've talked to your teachers, I've talked to your parents, we've gone to bat for you. This can't happen again. Day before that match, I don't know if he got caught skipping school, smoking in a bathroom. I don't remember what it was, something really stupid. Coach kicked him off. The next day is this semifinal round duel with Riverside defending state champs. I'm gonna have to go back and check myself. I don't want to exaggerate anything, but I remember that they lost it by a point or two. We forfeited 103. That's my point. Right. Like, doing what he said he was going to do, holding kids accountable, was more important even than maybe his only chance to win a state title.
Right.
We forfeited 103 pounds and lost a very close match. That could have been the deciding factor. And Riverside went on and won another state title that year. And Coach Marsh never won his title. So that always stuck with me.
Principles, and he stood by it, and right, and that's why he had the impact on you. And I'm sure, the guys,
right.
Most of the team remember that, right? If not all.
Absolutely, right? Yeah. Might have hated him at the time, but
right. I'm sure, right?
You don't forget something like that, man.
And the kids and some of the parents, I'm sure too, right? But
yeah,
big picture, right? They all, I'm sure, at some point realized what he was doing. So,
I don't know if it was that same team, but I think it was that same team earlier that year, January '95. They're dominating everybody. Our conference isn't that strong, and he's trying to come up with ways to keep them motivated, right? Because we'd go into a conference duel, would be 72-3, just killing everybody. So he came up with this promotion. Of course, no internet, right? So wherever he had to look into records to find out what the state record was for takedowns. And we started printing flyers. Come to our last home duel against Greenville Rose and watch New Bern break the state takedown record.
Oh, wow.
He ended up catching a lot of flack for that because people got offended even back then. Like, oh, you're embarrassing our guys. And we were like, no, we're trying to motivate our guys. So Greenville Rose comes to New Bern. We put these flyers out on everybody's cars in the parking lot. Come watch us break the state takedown record. And we're killing them. Each kid's getting, 7, 8, 9 takedowns every match. And the record was somewhere around 80.
Okay.
And so, we all started at 103 back then and worked up. So we were somewhere around 170 when we 189 maybe when we knew we were going to break that record. And he kind of called them off, just wrestle your match and finish. We ended up with 82 takedowns, which did set a record. But what we didn't know, he called them off with maybe 3 matches to go. And I didn't look this up, but the national takedown record was like 4 or 5 more than that.
Oh,
so if they would have kept pushing, they would add the national takedown record. But they ended up with 82 takedowns on that duel, January 31, 1995. And man, I thought somewhere on here I had how many we got. 837 takedowns in the 94-95 season. Wow. That's pretty cool.
That's awesome.
That was one of the better teams that he had for sure.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, I'm sure if he knew the national record, right, he would have waited one more match to call.
Oh yeah, we would definitely been gunning for that. Yeah, but we didn't even know. Didn't know how close we were.
That's pretty cool. Well, thanks, Coach. I appreciate the stories, and like I said, we've been talking for months. Just ideas and philosophy and life and wrestling. So it's glad to catch up.
Yeah, man. When I get, I have to have you on hopefully one day when I actually pull it together and
we'll put a date out there. Put a date when you're gonna have your first one and get your people, and then I'll jump on once you get rolling. But have those core 3 people at least first, and put a date out there to hold yourself accountable. And
Yeah, I've had a couple of those. I recorded them it's funny how, and this has been great, but it's funny how I can have such a great conversation, like I was telling you before, with even Raymond or Jeremiah, just organically, and then hit that record button and try to have a conversation, and we're weird.
Fumbling over things, right?
Well, look, man, you're welcome here anytime too. For a family vacation, come down here and coach some wrestling. We've got a house on the Pamlico Sound.
Oh, wow.
We can set you guys up in. So, if you
We're
can
just
get
down
here,
that way actually last at the top with the family last
Topsail,
yeah.
like an hour from here.
Oh yeah, we went last summer, a family trip with my family, brother's family, and a family friend. We went down there last summer. It was great. First time ever been down there. It was awesome.
Yeah. You got to come back, man. We'll take care of you.
Yeah, it's beautiful down there. So, well, good to know. Very good to know. So,
Thanks for having me on.
yeah, thanks, Coach.
All right. Have a good one.